When you start looking for a TIG welder, the first thing that pops into most people's heads is the price tag you saw on a cheap Chinese unit a few months ago. I'd been there, spent a weekend scrolling through YouTube videos, convinced that a $150 budget welder would do the job for my hobby projects. Then the first few welds turned out uneven, the torch kept flickering, and the whole thing felt like a gamble. That's why I'm taking a step back and asking the big question: does stepping up to a more reputable brand actually protect you from that regret, or is it just another overpriced piece of equipment? Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. The Precision TIG 225, from the brand simply called TIG, positions itself right in the middle of that decision curve. It's not the cheapest model you'll find, but it's also not the industrial-grade beast that costs several $1,000s. What matters is whether the trade-offs it makes line up with the kinds of projects you plan to tackle. If you're a weekend warrior who wants to dabble in thin-sheet stainless steel or clean aluminum joints, and you've already run into the limits of a low-end machine, this could be the smarter buy. If you're only ever welding thick plate or you need a unit that can run non-stop in a production line, you'll probably skip it and look at something more robust. First, let's talk about the practical day-to-day experience of plugging in the Precision TIG 225. The unit comes with a standard NEMA 650 plug and a 9-foot power cord. That length is not just a convenience for moving the welder around a garage, it actually lets you reach a distant outlet without having to stretch an extension cord, which is a common source of voltage drop and flickering on cheaper machines. In my tests, the cord stayed flexible and didn't tangle when I coiled it, meaning you can pull the welder out to the back of a workbench or even to a small outdoor patch and still have a stable power connection. One of the standout features is the built-in TIG pulsar. For anyone who's ever tried to weld thin aluminum, the pulsar helps you modulate the heat input so the metal doesn't melt away too quickly. In real terms, that means you can hold a steady bead on an inch aluminum sheet without the typical chew-up you see on low-end units. The pulsar isn't a magic button that automatically perfects every weld, but it does give you finer control over the arc, which is especially useful when you're transitioning between thin and slightly thicker sections in the same project. If your typical work involves delicate automotive trim, decorative art pieces, or thin weld tubing, that extra heat control can be the difference between a clean finish and a patchwork of burn-through. The digital meter on the front panel is another small but significant convenience. It displays amperage in large, easy-to-read numbers, and the controls are spaced out enough that you won't accidentally dial the wrong setting while wearing gloves. For a lot of beginners, fiddling with tiny knobs can be frustrating and lead to inconsistent welds. The simple layout here means you can set the machine to 150 amps, step down to 70 for a thin sheet pass, and then jump back up without having to pause and read an obscure LCD. The meter isn't a high-resolution readout that shows you incremental decimal changes, but the granularity it offers is more than sufficient for hobby-level work. Now, let's address the thing you might not see advertised right away: the welding range of 5 to 230 amps. This is a fairly wide span for a unit in its price bracket, but there are hidden caveats. While the upper limit of 230 amps sounds impressive, the unit's transformer and internal components are sized for light to medium duty. When you push it above 180 amps for an extended period, you'll notice the fan kicking in louder and the machine warming up noticeably. It doesn't shut down, but it does suggest the design isn't optimized for heavy-duty, high-amperage welding that you'd find in a professional shop. So if you're planning to weld inch or thicker plate on a regular basis, you may find yourself hitting the upper range and feeling that the machine is working harder than you'd like. Another practical consideration is the absence of a built-in foot pedal. Many TIG welders in this class rely on a hand-controlled amperage dial, which can be limiting when you need to make subtle adjustments mid-weld. The Precision TIG 225 doesn't come with a foot pedal out of the box, so you'll either have to purchase one separately or learn to manage the arc exclusively with the hand wheel. For beginners, that can be a steep learning curve. For seasoned welders, it may not be a deal-breaker, but it's something to keep on your mental checklist when you compare alternatives. Who should actually buy this machine? If you're an intermediate hobbyist who already knows how to set up a TIG welder, the Precision TIG 225 offers a solid blend of control,